Oh, I think we're
Yes.
live.
Yeah.
Yay! Um, Hi, everyone. My name is Lori Beth Goldman, and I go by Lori Beth on Facebook if you don't know me. And just to give you a brief introduction of me before we get started, I'm a psychotherapist and a psycho-spiritual mentor for women, and I help women. I provide women with the somatic, therapeutic, and okay, we're still live. I just want to make sure it's still going. Um, and spiritual tools to resolve lifelong trauma so that they can stop being a self-improvement project and actually get to enjoy life. And and then I do this show every week. This show is called Exploring Genuine Transformation. And we are at episode number 50 today, which is really
Wow.
exciting. And I'm really excited to have Caity here. And I'm excited for this topic. We're going to be exploring the feminine approach to transformation. So it really goes with the show, which is about genuine transformation. And part of how when I created this show, my intention behind it was actually to focus on transformation as not something to get what we want in life, which there is a lot of that in the coaching world. Gain mastery over this thing, get this relationship, get this job, get this amount of money. But actually what I've been really interested in is interviewing people who are on what I would call the edge of transformation, that is about transforming for the sake of having more of ourselves, for having more intimacy with life, for having more freedom, having more peace, more of an inner experience. And what I would say, and what I feel like is a huge core part of my work, is how do we be human? How do we be a human being in this human life, in this body? So I'm really excited to have Caity here today, not only for this topic, but because I feel like everything I just said is really like at the heart of her work. And I've been very inspired by you, Caity, over the time that I found you. And, the way that I think you are both delve into the body, but also are really bringing, more tantric practice and the practice of actually just how do we just be with this experience? Really what we're talking about today. That is pretty much
Starting it right off with our own personal as the gateway.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think what you're referring to is we both hopped on this call and we're like, it's like we're both having pretty chaotic kind of sort of a lot of, transition and just things happening in a way, like for me today, things happening in a way where it's like they're happening fast and unexpectedly. And for you, your own version of that. So
Totally.
so we're living the topic right now.
Always. That's why I
Oh,
teach what I teach, because it's just the experience that I know. So, yeah. Yeah. Thank
yeah.
you for that intro. I resonate with everything that you said too. Yeah, being human, intimacy with life, and not trying to get somewhere through our practice. That really resonates with me. So, thank you.
Yay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So before we dive in more, and we're going to dive into this topic quite a bit, and what, also find out from Caity what she means by the feminine path of transformation, which I'm really excited to learn. I want to just, for those of you who don't know her, you used to go by Caity Flanagan, but now you're going by Caity Reilly.
Caity Reilly. Yeah, Riley's my middle name, and it's my maiden, like my maternal lineage name. Yeah, yeah. So I honestly like I changed my name because I do so much work around sex and the erotic, and my family wasn't super ready for that, so I gave them a little bit of a break. And, shifted my social media presence as an act of like kindness and compassion to them. So yeah. But yeah, I've always loved my middle
Yeah,
name.
I love your middle name too. Yeah.
Thanks.
So Katie's a healer, a guide, and a tantric and somatic practitioner. And she's dedicated to, bringing people back home to themselves, to their bodies, to their hearts. And really this, I mean, and this is what we're going to be talking about today, like what we could call accepting all parts of ourselves, but also an integration back into wholeness, that every moment can be that experience of, feeling our own goodness and our own wholeness, no matter what's happening, no matter what the experience is. And I'm just looking at your bio.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I know you work a lot with the body and with you say here alchemizing trauma. I love that.
Yeah,
I think that is
thanks.
I think that does describe what you do through the process of actually going in, right, and being
Mhm.
with ourselves, able to transform trauma, as well as you do actually have a lot of training in trauma and
Yes, a lot.
vagus, the vagus nerve, and yeah.
Mhm.
Um, so I actually would like, you didn't say this in your bio, but because I know a
Yeah.
bit about your background, that what I love about your work is that you you study with a lot of teachers, and you've studied a lot of actual practices and also done a
Mhm.
lot of trainings, and you're bringing that with your own, unique way of working with people. And I just really respect that, because
Mm.
it's really like, it's having the background and actually learning things that then you can
Yeah.
integrate. Mhm.
Yeah, I think for me it's funny, like I've reflected on that because I'm such a nerd. Like I love to study everything about the body, everything about neuroscience, everything about consciousness. Like I just like I'm like maybe it's because I have a Sagittarius moon or something. Like I don't know, but I'm a forever student in my life. And part of it for me, like the training and all the things, which includes, somatic experiencing and Hakomi and polyvagal theory and trauma-informed yoga and all of that stuff, it's really been like a way that I've found refuge in being human. Like to actually be able to find the language and study the systems. And it's so funny because then there's like a part of my approach where it's like, and we throw all of it out the door. Um, but there's, so I really like paradox. But there's this really, I think as a practitioner, and especially when it comes to trauma, every time I've done one of those trainings, not only do I learn, you know, the way the body is working and the nervous system and the science behind it, but it also takes me deeper into my process. And I just find again and again, and I'm sure you know this too, it's like the deeper you do your own exploration, the more devoted you are to that, the more you're able to hold people in the depths and to go there with them. So it's also, it's like for personal healing, it's because my brain loves it. It's because I think it's really important too to be grounded, especially when we're working with consciousness practices and trauma, which most people who come to explore consciousness have trauma because we're human. So
Yep.
yeah, it's like a way of caring for ourselves and for each other that I think is really important as practitioners. That's felt really important to me to have.
Mhm. I
Yeah.
love that. Yeah, yeah, I feel similarly. And I think that having that background, like, it's like I've got a lot of my own background has actually come from all the practitioners that I've worked with, but then
Oh,
also
totally.
studying it at the same time, also
Yeah,
having that kind of, that middle point and getting it in my own system, in my own body.
it's the best way to do it.
Yeah, yeah. And then I know for me, and I think you're probably similar, that then I can be, now at this point, it's more of an intuitive, like I'm intuitively guided, but it's coming from theory and practice and things that are already, um, that sort of are inside then. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I feel so lucky to have had amazing teachers from like the get-go who really all of them kind of are these like mad scientists in some ways. Like they all have that quality of deep, deep study along with deep, deep experience. And particularly when it comes to spiritual practices, it's so important to have an understanding of trauma, and I would say a more feminine approach in that because the trauma approach is body inclusive.
Mhm.
Because most of these traditions are coming to us from monastic backgrounds or very different times, very different cultures, very different places that actually can't meet the systems, the nervous systems in particular, and the psyches of where we are now. They're really useful and they carry over, but without this kind of like to me, translation, and particularly awareness around how trauma functions, um, they can kind of miss the mark or sometimes be really challenging or harmful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we could go on a whole, I could,
It's
yeah,
the whole thing.
Buddhist experience and, many, many
Uh-huh.
years of practice and, not having
Yeah,
that integrated in certain lineages.
totally.
Um, yeah, so that's beautiful. I love that. I would love to just start this conversation about the feminine approach to transformation by
Yeah.
asking you, how you would define that, just for us to kind of, and then we'll
Mm.
dive into kind of also how one might be able to begin to practice. Yeah.
Yeah. The first word that comes up for me is underbelly. Just like underbelly. Just drop that into the space. But um, I would say, the feminine approach is a down and in. It's not a quest to go find something outwardly or achieve something or fix something. It's about opening and softening and feeling and being with the direct experience that's unfolding. And it's not like, to me, it's not direct experience through our energy bodies or through our like psychic or vision or shamanic experience. It's actually the direct experience of being human, of being in form. And it's like, to me, it's a very mythic journey, and there's so many descent journeys that we could look at. Like, my favorite myth is the myth of Inanna, the Sumerian goddess, who becomes queen of both heaven and earth and masters resurrection, self-resurrection. And to me, it's like, if we look at we look at how life goes and how many times we are kind of, as one of my teachers calls it, gets the cosmic 2x4. I call it getting the cosmic piano dropped on your head, because I'm really like stubborn, or really have been. So it's like walking around like a cartoon character, and then the piano drops from the sky and you're flattened out. You're like, oh, I have to be with this now. I need to restart. We get the call and then we have to go down and everything unravels. And rather than immediately trying to fix that, being with ourselves in the process. And I think it's really just about our capacity to stay with us as we go through the challenges of life, which are inevitable.
Can you say a little bit about, I love that like myth and how it relates. And can you say, when you say like the
Yeah.
call, um, we just are having
Mm,
an
yeah.
internet blip, but
Um,
we just had a little internet blip, but
yeah,
yeah,
you
the
got a little
call,
blurb.
when
Yeah.
you say it as, yeah, we did. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
When you say it as a call,
Mhm.
what are the different ways that you've seen people kind of have this call? Like what calls,
Mhm.
and also, are we like, within that, are we talking about this as like only for women, or is this like a process that men also go through?
Yeah. I've had this beautiful experience recently in my practice where like, there's always an ebb and flow. So I work with men and women and folks of all gender expressions. But I've recently had an influx of men coming into the inner work. And what I've noticed for for them, the kind of like men who are coming in and who've often come into my practice, are men who have sort of outwardly achieved. Like, they've gone on their hero's journey and they've like done the thing and accomplished and learned and gathered and created. And the thing that they come into experience is to feel more, like to feel more in their bodies, to feel more in their relationships, to feel more of everything they're doing out here, to have more of their experience. And I love that, because I'm like, that's fucking courageous to do. To choose to slow down and feel, especially as a man, in the culture that we live in. Like, there's nothing that really requires that of you, not even necessarily relationship and sex. And so it's like, the call, what I see in everybody, is this call that rises up from the inside out. And it's not a call towards a tangible thing. It's very felt. It's sometimes very quiet. It's oftentimes extremely disruptive to the lives that we've built, and we may or may not know that when we start to get the call. But
Mm.
it's this longing. It's this it's this yearning, like there has to be more, or there's something else. Like, and so sometimes, and this has come up, this is like not the most fun way to get the call, but it can be that like sense of like anxiety or existential dread
Yeah.
are really great indicators that I'm like, cool, there's some part of us that wants us to be with it. Sometimes it's through the body, sometimes it's through an illness or an injury and no longer being able to function in the world in the way that we have.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's an initiation through a life phase. So it can be on the other side of early parenthood or postpartum for men and women, or just at these different kind of, in tantra we call them kramas, these different increments of time that we kind of naturally go through. And it's a call to come back to ourselves. Like it's a call to oftentimes what the process involves is really reintegrating parts of the soul. But we can also say that as reintegrating parts of the self and parts of the psyche and parts of us that are cut off because of trauma and core wounding. Like we can look at it in a very like psychotherapy lens, or we can look at
Yeah.
it in a very spiritual shamanic lens. And in my experience of dancing between both those realms, it's the same thing. It's like the body is the home to the heart, which wants us to slow down and intrinsically knows how to heal.
Mhm.
And when we can learn how to be with ourselves and tolerate our experience, it happens. And then there's a massive amount of like awakening, like vitality comes back to the body, wellness, awareness. We can access different states of consciousness, creativity, sexuality. It's just like more of us is here and included. And I think we start to wake up to like I don't have an answer to what being human is, but I'm constantly amazed of like, oh, there's so much more to it than I thought. Like it's yes, it's a simple and mundane, but it's big.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because what you're also speaking to is this like going in and down and being in
Hmm.
the body is, I mean, my
Yeah,
experience is that because I have a lot of practice with this, although I'm always,
it's
I'm
always
always,
more.
but is that like it actually starts to feel for me like the whole cosmos exists within my
Yes.
being, my consciousness, like
Yeah.
it's right. And that is very in the body, and it's in down, it's not. And so
It's not
that
up.
yeah, so that was sort of a question I had,
Yeah.
like if you were to, because you're calling this a feminine approach to transformation,
Hmm.
and you're sort of, the way you're defining that is this,
Hmm.
what I, part of what I just said, and sort of this experience of really feeling and being. What do you think
Yeah.
the male, the masculine approach to transformation is? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if we think about like, so I'm a huge nerd around Jungian psychology, and I think you are too, right? Like, ugh, love it. I love it because it's like this amazing form of psychotherapy that really matches and mirrors through Western language a lot of what I would say is like the foundation to the lineages of Tantra that I practice within. I'm like, they've translated it into a version of the like Western brain and structure. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
which so it's these two qualities of being, right? And it's basically like the universe, and as humans, we love paradox and we love opposites because they create harmony and balance. And then there's like this.
Okay, we're losing reception. Something. We just froze. Let's see if we come back. We just froze
It's
for a second.
catching up.
I don't know if it's on your end or my end, but
I saw. Oh, now it's mine. It's swapped.
oh, okay.
It was yours for a second. Let me see. I'm just gonna turn off the Wi-Fi in here and use like one less device. I don't know if that actually helps, but there we go. So, what do you think? You think we're stable now?
Yeah, I think we're stable. Yeah. So
Our
you were saying
internet is stable.
you're, we were, yes, this topic, the topic. There is no stability.
Totally. None. Yeah. So like the masculine and feminine, whether it's through Jungian psychology or Tantra, or we could look at it through alchemy, through other like myth and archetype, it's kind of mirrored the same way everywhere, is that the masculine is a very directive energy. It's very penetrative. We look at the biologically sexed male body. This is not a surprise, why we've assigned it this quality. And so in kind of like a more masculinized approach to transformation, we have a breakdown, we see a problem, and we solve it, right? There's like a kind of like tangible step-by-step directionality to a process. And it's brilliant. There's so much genius in it. There's so much that's created from it. It's like problems are engineered in every sense, like, and I think about like invention has come from this place. It's like, oh, we have this problem, this challenge, like, and now we've invented the wheel. And like, it's this really amazing creation process that is more about moving in one direction and tangibly shifting an outcome. So like in Jungian psychology, the hero's journey is like going out and actually slaying the dragon. And then if we were to look at the feminine approach, it's the feminine qualities both in Tantra and in Jungian psychology involve the dark and the unconscious. And the dark as not an aspect of shadow or evil or um, anything like that. And there's so much to clean up around that. But the dark as in this liminal state, this empty fullness, which is talked a lot about in tantric Buddhism and the tantra lineages I work within. But it's like the beginning of all creation and all potentiality is contained inside. Like if you were to look at like the consciousness of an egg or a seed, it looks like nothing, and on the inside is everything that's needed to create all of life.
Mm.
So if you split an egg open or you split a seed open, it it loses its quality, right? Like you can no longer create. So using that directional energy to working with the feminine doesn't work. But if you place this kind of precious object and into soil, into a dark space, into itself, and you wait and you learn how to tolerate and listen, it's not about seeing. It's like you can't see anything there. You feel your way through the dark. That's your inner sight, is your felt sense of your body, the felt sense of the experience of like, oh, like this egg is now splitting into an embryo, or my shell is cracking and that's terrifying and I have no idea what's next, but I'm going to stay present for it. Oh, now I have a root. Oh, now I'm drawing up nutrients from the soil. Oh, now I'm moving out. Like there's just a different cyclical rhythm to it.
Mm.
And it's not about interrupting the process or moving the process anywhere, but staying intimately inside of it and allowing life, that potentiality of life that's contained inwardly, to become expressed outwardly. And then it's like, if we think about a seed, it's like the seed has to come up to the light. And then, like, if we thought about like the masculine as the sun or the gardener, it's like this beautiful plant is blooming and like it needs the right, amount of sunshine, and it needs, these nutrients put in the soil, and you can observe that and do that. And then ultimately, though, the plant is in this cycle. So even with the sun and even with the nutrients, like the plant will return to the feminine and will like die back and go to the soil to be composted again. So it's like we need both. And I think one of the challenges we're in is we're in like we've overused the muscle of the masculine approach to transformation. Like if I do this and this, I'll get that. And we've forgotten that like that's not
Mhm.
how life works. It's certainly how manifestation in some sense can work. It's certainly, we can create amazing things from that. But if we are leaving out a whole part of our psyche, our soul, our nature, then that's why I see the people who are like, I'm great at manifesting, come into my practice and they're like, I can't feel, like I'm numb. I've manifested everything. And like I there's something missing. It's like, yeah, you like this
Yeah.
whole part of your
Like
being.
it feels, that was a beautiful explanation of that. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's actually really moving, and like it definitely like stirs something in me, and it's beautiful to think
Mm,
about also from the space of Jungian psychology, and also of just
yeah.
of myth, as well.
It speaks to our soul. Like the thing I love about myth is it's just like all of us resonate with it. Like that myth is a human creation. I mean, I don't know, but I can assume that like plants and animals may or may not be going around telling myths. I'd love to be wrong about that and find out like actually they're like just incredible storytellers and they're constantly doing that. Like I think that might be true for plants more than animals. I think animals are more emergent and in the moment. But but yeah, it's like it speaks to our soul. Like all of us know it. Like it doesn't matter kind of our lineage or culture or background. It's like when we hear a myth, we like hear our own experience reflected.
Yeah.
And like nature and archetypes are such amazing ways to do that across the board, kind of across all humans. So
Mhm.
my
Yeah.
teachers are really good
And metaphor.
storytellers.
What'd you say?
Exactly. I said all my teachers are really good storytellers and the lineage I study in Tantra is all about finding the story underneath the story. So I don't know,
Well, I
it's
think
something
because
I
it also
love.
it points to the experience, like when you were describing the seed, right? And then also the way that that can intersect with the sun and the like. There's a
Yeah.
more feeling that like. It actually takes it takes us. I mean, this is my experience. Like in that moment, it took me right to the experience that you were speaking of, right? So instead of then being in
Yeah.
my mind about it, it was like, oh, yeah, I feel that, and I could feel like the
Hmm.
unfolding of that seed, like as though it was deep inside of me, and my own kind of like
Yeah.
my own just emergent experience that's happening right now as
Hmm.
we're on, interview, and
Yeah.
sort of yeah, and how where I'm experiencing that in my body. And I mean, even
Mm.
actually, because I've been struggling, I'll just say this because it's just alive right now, but like I've been
Yeah.
having really severe stomach stuff today. And it's,
Mm.
there's a slight part of me that's been like subtly at times resisting. And when you were speaking, it was
Mm.
like something got to open. Like I still have
Mm.
the exact same sensation. This is
Totally.
like exactly what the practice of this feminine approach to transformation is. It's
Yeah.
like my system is like could rest into those sensations, and
Hmm.
was sort of I'm in a different experience of it. It feels more like a kind of like a river of like a flowing river of
Yeah.
the totality of my experience that's just continuing to emerge as we sit here, versus like kind of, yeah, an experience of
Hmm.
grasping, yeah, like using
Gripping. The grip.
gripping.
Yeah.
There's this, oh, I'm feeling this pain, which is also coming from my mind. It's not like the
Yeah.
story that I'm feeling this pain, versus like I'm inside of my experience. So
Yeah.
I guess I just shared that just to give an example of what you're speaking
That's
to.
perfect. Yeah. Well, that's 100% it when you said like I'm inside my experience. And we talked about this when we had our like our call, but I'm not going to remember the words, but I can like remember the quality, but it's oh yeah, it was one of the gifts of the feminine approach to transformation is developing this capacity, this like I call it like quiet okayness because from the outside it's like quiet in the sense that like from the outside you may still be having symptoms, you may like nothing may have changed in the room
Mhm.
like tangibly, like like that you could see, but your inner experience, and then I would say the felt experience of you in a room or the felt experience of a room completely changes when you let go into what's actually happening. And like, I'll just speak personally. I mean, that grip is like the number one way I scare myself out of my own transformation and healing. And it's the call. Like when there's that much like discomfort, like I can share super vulnerably. Like I've had this very specific sensations of what I would label, in the past and even now like anxiety for the last couple of days. And I'm like, oh, I haven't like had to sit with this in so long. in this way, in this intensity, and kind of makes sense given my personal life and also the state of the world. Like, it's like, oh, I should probably take a scoop of compassion. Like, everybody's anxious right now, like normal, and you're fine, and
You're human.
just a human who gets anxious. You're never past it. I was like, oh yeah, yeah, got it. Thank you. But I was working with my mentor and my guide, and she just reminded me of this thing that I've probably said to like my clients hundreds of times, and that she's also probably said to me like hundreds of times, along with all my other teachers, of like, it's the call. Like some part of you is calling you to slow down and be with you.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's it. Like, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's indicative of something wrong with your nervous system or body, or like that there's anything necessarily wrong. It's just like a part of you needs to know that you're going to stay with it and
Mhm.
slow down with it. And that, like, again, that to me is that feminine approach of like, oh, rather than like move my body or go take an herb or a medicine or go to a doctor or like do a thing to fix it, it's like I'm going to take a breath and I'm going to loosen my system, literally open and soften the physical body, and um, and then see what emerges. And sometimes it intensifies, but what I've always found is it's just a wave. Like
Mhm.
there's a temporality to it, and if we can hang out for long enough, like it will shift. Like life will always move us, but we're
Well,
so terrified of not knowing how long it's going to take. Yeah,
yeah,
go ahead.
and I really feel like that's where like the relaxation is, I mean,
Hmm.
like the relaxation is in allowing whatever is there to be there. Like
Yeah.
for me, every time I was just working with she's only 19, a 19-year-old client who, I mean, she was just talking about how just learning to be with her feelings, like just let them be exactly as they are. I know,
Yes.
and she's so young, it's great. And she's suffering from
Oh,
pretty intense things right now. But like she was
yeah.
like, I feel better just because I'm allowing myself to, feel. It was just so, yeah, just
Yeah.
actually for this call, it was so beautiful.
Oh,
Um,
God. I love that.
yeah, but I was also just thinking, I was thinking when you said that too, and this is where like I think that not that we need to have a like such a big conversation about it, but what is emergent sometimes um, is like, oh, I need to go to the doctor, right? But it doesn't
Mhm.
come from like I've had a lot of illness this year, and so I've had the experience where my what's it called? Like my MO or my habit pattern is to be like, oh my God,
Mm.
I'm feeling this. I need to take whatever. I need to take this supplement. I need to do this with my
Yeah.
body. And so what you just described, what I really loved about it is because I've seen this again and again in my experience, is that it doesn't mean that we don't do those things, but we
Oh,
don't
yeah,
start
we totally do.
like it's actually about so what emerges to do feels like for me, and this is also true in a lot of practices, like it's true in Tibetan Buddhism,
Hmm.
it comes from then a wisdom place. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
this is just the right, this is the next emergent thing is to take
Yeah.
a supplement versus this kind of like what I've experienced a lot is this like fear and wanting it to go away, and so my
Hmm.
wanting it to be over, so my system goes, I need to do something versus
Hmm.
going in
Yeah.
and down like you're talking about and just being like, okay, I'm experiencing
Yeah.
this, like can I get more
Yeah.
intimate with my experience? Mhm.
Totally. I call it reaction versus response. And it's like you can do the exact same thing, like go to the doctor or take the supplement or whatever the next right step is for you. But you can do it from reaction, from a nervous system grip, or you can do it from responding, like, oh, and that internal wisdom. That response is so, like, that quality to respond to life is so deeply liberating and powerful and empowering and healing to be able to move from that place and just be like, yeah, like, and for me, like, I love and respect Western medicine, and I also like oftentimes resist it because of like my own stuff. But there have been these really humbling things. Like I went so far away from like not even taking any over the counter stuff to like now one of the acts of kindness to myself is being like, yeah, you just need an Advil. Like you're just a human. Like you just need some ibuprofen. It's okay. And it's like this responsiveness. And I'm like, oh, not a problem. And then the quality of the experience of taking it. It's like it may or may not be about the ibuprofen, but like that choice. Like I'm listening to me, I'm staying with me, I've got me, which is such a sacred vow and healing vow to all these like parts of ourselves that get cut off from trauma and core wounding, but saying like I am listening to you, like to my body, to my human experience, to my heart. That puts so much healing and goodness into place. And it's like, is it like chicken or the
Yeah,
egg? Is it the Advil or is it the responding? And the thing is we're so sensitized when we respond to. Like we really notice, at least for me, I really notice the impact of making a choice or eating a food or doing a thing with my body when I'm coming from response versus reaction, because reaction is overriding. And it's like, this thing I'm having, this experience I'm having, which is me in this moment, is a problem and I need to fix it, sends a very different message to our bodies, to our nervous systems, to our psyches. So, yeah, I call
yeah,
it like responding versus
yeah.
reacting. Yeah.
This is actually a great segue into kind of something that we talked about in the pre-interview that I think is like the heart of this, which both of us, I know it's really important to both of us. And to me, this has been like what I'm about to say has been actually probably the hardest journey throughout my whole
Yeah.
life, which is, you know, what if these sensations never change? Like, what if this trauma never changes? What if this
Mm.
healing that I've done for, like that was really, yeah. What if this wound never shifts? Um,
Yeah.
and that's such an important part of this feminine approach to transformation. It's like instead of trying to get
Yeah.
somewhere, and I know for me, this has just been like, this is actually kind of one of the hugest wounds, I would say, for me, which is like this kind
Hmm.
of sense of continuing to, having done this work for so long, continuing to
Yeah.
seek, and I'll finally be okay, and I'll finally feel okay. And life, then I'll be happy, or then I'll be whatever I'm
Hmm.
imagining it to be.
Totally.
And
Yep.
then and the misery and the suffering in that. And so I think
Yeah.
also when you speak about the ibuprofen and the whole thing you just said, right? It's like not only how can I bring kindness to my experience and be here right now with it, but also the experience of getting like seeing parts of myself where it's like, wow, I've worked on this for a long time and it may never be different. And or
Hmm.
whenever I go towards that, I actually can only go towards it in kind of a like it gets a little bit like it's toxic for me. So can I
Yeah.
just let it be? Like something about the experience of accepting um accepting what is now and accepting that some
Yeah.
things may never change. So I'm
It's
wondering
so
if you explain that.
humbling.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, I resonate with it. I don't know if I have any answers for it, but in I'm really grateful for the practices I have, and particularly the lineages of Tantra that I come from, and then this other work that I do in a modality called Open Heart that have like really driven this point home to me. And there have been like a couple things that have happened to me this year, and particularly during the pandemic, that just sort of like locked it in. It was like, oh, this is the only option, is to get okay with myself here.
Mm,
Um, that really opened my heart and shifted something. So it's like it's really hard to talk about until you like have an experience of staying for it, and even like a second of that experience of accessing that actual okayness, that actual acceptance. I don't like to use the word acceptance because I don't know about you, but it like comes with a lot of weight. Like, oh, if I
yeah,
accept something,
yeah,
then I've like integrated and it looks a certain way versus like being okay is just like
yeah,
boom, simple,
yeah.
okay. Like
I
I don't know.
like,
So
yeah, no, it's true. I feel that way also
yeah,
about surrender. That word tends to evoke the same thing. It's like I need to do some. It's like I need to accept or I need to
yeah,
surrender. This is being like, this is it. Like this is me.
yeah.
experience. Mhm.
And like the acceptance and surrender, I would say are the byproduct of that simple but profound choice to stay with ourselves. And that's really what it boils down to, for me, is like in this moment, in this pattern, in the way that I am absolutely breaking my own heart right now through through these choices, through this trauma, through these wounds playing out. Can I still stay with me? Can I not abandon myself? And can I um and that act of staying with me and not abandoning myself is me loving me, is me accepting me, is me allowing and surrendering to what is. Like all of that is there in that choice to stay. And and staying's a really hard thing to explain, but it's like it's not going
Oh no.
for higher self or awareness. It,
Say
it's
that again. We
it's
had a little bit of a blip. Will you say
oh
the
yeah.
last
I,
sentence? Yeah.
oh totally.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think my internet just got unstable again. I think it's okay now. Um, but staying isn't the experience of like opening my heart chakra or going to my energy body or even calling in like this witness self. It's like butt in the seat, human first, feeling my feelings, feeling my body, staying in this mundane, painful moment, this human moment, and in the staying, allowing the true gift of it to be opened naturally, which I don't need to go anywhere to experience. Which is like, that's kind of some more of the tantric teachings, but it's like when we can just choose to not abandon ourselves, to literally just say to the part of us that's like, for me, it's like fucking up my relationships all the time, like just like self-destructing them. I don't always do it, but there's always a point where I try to do it. So no, I guess I do always do it. I just may not complete the cycle. It may not implode in that moment. But like, my God, there's a part of me that like I realized this recently that that part of me is making sure I don't leave me for the relationship. It's like this
Mhm.
like quality of like this inner wisdom of like my human that's like, hey, the practice, the point is for you to stay with you. And I will always bring you back, whether it's through discomfort or destruction. It would be nice if it was not through those things, but like if I'm being totally honest, like I'm I'm very stubborn, so like it often has to be destruction and discomfort for me to be like, oh, like I'm starting to get a little bit better at the listening after, like a decade of like being in practice. But I'm like, oh, okay, I can listen a little sooner and things don't get quite as crazy. But sometimes it's also not true. Sometimes it is just life is big and the only thing we can do is like stay and like notice I have a breath and a heartbeat and allow and to be present. And I think that's massively courageous. And that also like heals trauma, right? Because we had an experience that was too big that we had to leave. So we're actually teaching our nervous systems, our bodies an entirely new thing every time we stay. I'm just like, every time I see someone do it, I like, there's like a little inner cry that happens. Sometimes I outwardly cry, but I'm like, oh, you just changed the whole thing. Like you just shifted the whole system. Like it's such a simple and profound choice. Um, I don't know if that answers it at all.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I actually really like the word stay. And I mean,
Too.
yeah. And that,
Yeah.
um,
It's the whole thing. It's like I think in the staying too, for me, I've had these profound experiences open up through making that choice to stay, where I feel the paradox of like, if this was my last breath and I was dying alone, like I would still be here loving me.
mm,
And
mm,
somehow in experiencing my aloneness, I
mhm,
also experienced the immense like, oh, I'm not alone in my experience. Like it opens up a quality of interbeing and interdependence for me. It opens up how much I love other people. And that's just like from my experiences of the big openings or stayings that I've had, but it
Mm,
really puts us in touch with that paradox of like, I've only got me,
mm,
and I am
mhm,
completely surrounded and loved,
mhm,
and just this like really intensely beautiful dance between the two.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, I'm just I mean, I was just thinking like it's beautiful to hear kind of this what you're saying about how, for you that kind of brings you into this feeling of interdependence or this sense of
Hmm.
being connected to everyone, as well as
Yeah.
yourself. And I was just thinking that, like we've been talking a lot, and I think it makes sense, right? Because when we're talking about transformation as well, about being with experiences that are more uncomfortable. But for some reason, when you said the experience of just being with our last breath, it put me in
Mm.
contact with just like, and this is part of the feminine approach to transformation as well. It's just like how to be present in this human body and this human life, because we can,
Yeah.
right? Like there can be this and this is, I think this is what you were describing before about some of the clients that might come to you who like have created everything that they want, but then they feel empty, or they don't
Hmm.
actually enjoy the moment to moment of it, right? And so
Yeah.
there's also something about like in this approach, it's actually about feeling more pleasure, like being more available to
Oh,
experience
totally.
that, right? Because
Yeah,
it's
we could do a whole
more
conversation
available,
about
yeah, more
that.
available to
Yeah.
experience like all of our human experience. And we tend to not think about that when life is kind of going well. But then, like you said, there for many people, there's an experience of like, I'm barely feeling my experience. So I'm having
Mm.
this life. I've actually had like the opposite. I feel like I've been like my whole life, I've been like feeling the depths of the experience. And it's so I feel things really deeply, but then
Yeah.
there's
Yeah. There- There's a whole cycle with that when you're an intensity seek. I am too. So I'm like, I know that one.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I love that you brought up pleasure because there's all right, like like where this all started for me was yoga and tantra when I was 17, and I didn't choose tantra. Tantra found me through my first teacher, and when I found it, it was like this soul call. I was like, oh, like everything about my being resonated with it. And I wasn't practicing like the neo-tantric or the sexual practices. Like this was very deep, um, from one particular text, the Bhairava Tantra, which comes out of Kashmir Shaivism. And then my teacher also works in the lineage of Shakta Tantra. But pleasure, it's this funny thing because we have like, there's also all these images of what pleasure looks like in the coaching world, like what it is to be like a turned on woman and like what it is to experience like pleasure. And it's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. But like, if you really get into what Tantra's like, go sit in the charnel grounds holding a skull. Like, go like be in the depths and suffering of what it is to be human. Like, be in the deepest places of despair, of like nothingness, of pain, of suffering, and open to that experience. And what you will find is pleasure. And pleasure looks nothing like what we put on Instagram.
Mhm,
Pleasure, I mean, my favorite thing, like,
mhm,
this is like both my favorite thing to get personally, I say fucked up by, but like also to have my clients get fucked up by is like just, oh my God, I'm experiencing sorrow. My heart is breaking, and I am experiencing immense pleasure at the same time.
mm,
Like grief and ecstasy, like Tantra and life, and what I would call consciousness or prana shakti, loves to mess up us thinking that it's one or the other, which is our brain and our other parts of our nervous system. And life is like, oh no, no, it's totality all at once, which to me, that's like, right, we go back to the egg or what it is to be in the feminine, which is like
mhm,
everything is opening, everything is emerging. And to access like pleasure to me is to make this immense choice around sovereignty and to say, like, I am here opening and feeling the experience and I am staying for it. no matter like how horrific it might be on the outside. And not only that, but I'm allowing my consciousness, my vitality, which is both like arising in me and moving through me, to come and meet this moment. And oftentimes it is like there's like a bit of an erotic quality to it, like a quality of eros, or in tantra we call it prana shakti. Like it is life force. It is what moves us. And to access like pleasure, not when everything is going right, but when everything circumstantially doesn't look like anything at all, is so radical and
Mm-hmm.
undoes all these stories. And not only that, but like you have to be in a certain nervous system state to do it. So it's like very healing to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
To go from not feeling or only one type of feeling, like to access pleasure, we have to um, be anchored in ourself enough in order to open to our nervous system being in two places at once. Like our heart needs to be open. So we literally need to be in ventral. And we need to be opening to like our sympathetic and parasympathetic state. So it's a very big act to feel, because in opening to pleasure, you're also willing to feel everything else at the same time too,
Yeah.
which again, like that's super healing. If you've experienced trauma, that's super healing to and that is a download of awakening, I would say, to get out of like binary
Mm-hmm.
um
Mm-hmm.
thinking. And it, to me, I'm like, I don't know, if the feminine, like say you can't change the circumstances of your life, right? Like you're like the witch being burned at the stake or the person being persecuted, but to choose to stay in your body. And not only that, but to have this experience of pleasure that makes no sense. Like
Yeah.
that, I'm just like,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
disrupts the
That,
whole thing.
yeah. Yeah.
It puts you in
Oh,
touch with your indestructible nature.
yeah. That's so beautiful. I'm so glad that you brought this in because I was sort of also just referencing on it, like in the sense of, I think people just, I think there's a lot of people who, I think when we can't feel the depths of our experience,
Mhm.
we actually don't feel like, if you can't feel the depths of pain, you don't really feel the depths of pleasure. Like even as
Totally,
a,
you cap
even as a,
out.
even as a binary experience, right? But then
Yeah, yeah.
I love that you're bringing it into, I mean, it, and also that it comes full circle to this image of the seed, right? And the totality that actually it's
Hmm.
about like the feminine approach to transformation is about the totality of our experience and that kind of,
Hmm.
like you said, the brain can't even really compute. You can
No.
experience that you could be inside of something so deeply that you could be
Mhm.
experiencing the depths of pain or sorrow or whatever. And then you could also be in like such open pleasure. But that's also because the
Mhm.
body and the nervous system, and this is what you're describing in much more technical language than me, but the body, which is beautiful. The body and the nervous system is such an it's like learning to be so open and one with existence that that's why like anything can kind of flow through. And in that state of being that open, that
Yeah,
sensation is just allowed to flow. That's where, I mean, that's my experience of it, is that that's why, like when my aperture is that open, right, and I'm not in the mind and I'm able to, I mean, the mind might still be going, but then there's an experience.
totally. Always there.
Yeah. There's an experience of it, of being able to experience like so many different sensations all at once. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say that's what we're hardwired for. And what happens is we interrupt that, or trauma interrupts a, I think it just froze again.
Yeah, it did. Go ahead.
Oh no. I was
So
gonna say, like,
you
we're
said trauma.
hardwired.
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, like trauma is a disruption in our natural state of our nervous system. Like it's a disruption, like an experience gets truncated, we get stuck in one part of it, but like we're a whole system that constantly wants to be in movement and motion. And as long as we're in that movement and motion, which is always happening in the background, then we're actually capable of like so many states of existence, so many qualities of being, but also, literal like states in our body to happen all at once. And like if we just get out of the way and trust that, and allow it. It's amazing. It's where, to kind of circle back, it's like that's where we do experience our, I would say, the true nature of the body, which
Hmm.
is this: when I go down and in, I access everything.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
favorite practice and something I teach is this thing called body as a universe, which are these tantric teachings to be like, no, no, we're not like transcending, we're not following energy, we're going down and in to experience all that you are, and to, really get to have this
Yeah.
healing and awakening experience of just like what happens when we allow the body to be
Yeah.
much wiser than our brains.
Beautiful. Well, we could talk about this for hours, I think. Oh wait, she froze again. Hold on.
Oh
But
no.
I was
Sorry.
just gonna say we could talk about this for hours and we're gonna have to wrap up. But one thing, I think that's a beautiful place to end. And I just want to say, it just feels important to say in this conversation because that I think it's always really important to either, I think you'll agree with this, so, but you can tell me, um,
Totally.
either you can be doing these kinds of practices, but then always be making sure that you are either working with somebody who's trauma informed or can help with the trauma piece, or or you have someone separately who you can also do trauma work with. Because I think
Yeah.
I just want to say that because it feels like a lot of what we're talking about, there's this kind of expansive sense. And for
Mm-hmm.
some people, it's not safe enough in the body and the
Yeah.
mind. So we have to be working in tandem. And Caity and I can both do that with people, but other
Yeah.
people, for some, it might be like, I know that we've both studied with teachers who don't have that trauma background, but then
Mhm.
we've been in other kind of working with other trauma practitioners.
Yeah.
So just to say that if you start to, if you were to kind of like, if you're inspired by this conversation and you're sitting with yourself in this way and then it starts to feel overwhelming, that's super normal. Like, just
Yeah.
not,
I'm also like, don't just go and start studying with any tantra teacher. I'm like, oh my God, don't do it. Please don't do it. But it's true. I think you're spot on. And what I appreciate about all of my teachers who to various degrees are trauma informed, and I've luckily, for the most part in my path, always been engaging with a therapist as well through my work, which I highly recommend therapy. And I recommend somatic therapy in particular, so body-based therapy. Um, like, is that if you start with human first, if like that is really the commitment of the practice, um, then that is a much safer type
yeah,
of practice than something that focuses on energy, enlightenment, transcendence, raising consciousness. If you
mm-hmm.
start with somebody who is like, let's get you into your body and put you intimately in touch with your heart, like, you, um, that's something I recommend people look for. And there's not a lot of, I mean, it's something that you and I kind of, I would say, are kind of like at the edge of an
Yeah,
emergent practice of what is it to take, deep, deep spiritual practices and to add a trauma informed lens to it. And I
absolutely.
hope to see many other Tantra practitioners in time becoming trauma informed, because otherwise the practices, traditionally you were doing this living with a guide. So
Yeah.
somebody, in a sense, you were held, and we live in a very different world right now and very different time. So we do need to be deeply held by our bodies and our nervous systems and by others if we're going to engage on this path for sure to be safe.
Beautiful. We could probably do a whole talk on this. There's so much that's still coming
Totally.
through.
There's like five other talks.
Yeah, yeah. Well, maybe we will do another talk soon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. And I'd love for people to, yeah, this was a really great conversation. And like,
Yeah,
it would be fun to have a part two in some capacity,
totally.
a show or not, or just as a live. But
Yeah.
I would love for people to, who don't know you, to, know where to follow you, what kinds
Mhm.
of programs and offerings that you have going on.
Yeah. I'm horrible at updating my website, but you can go to serpentandrose.com to see some of my offerings. Mainly what I'm doing these days is one-on-one work called Love's Embrace, which are really everything we talked about, personalized. But I am teaching a course, actually a first in-person, socially distanced course in the Bay Area, and I have a few spots open for that. Friday evening, November 20th, and all day Saturday. And it's a course called Body as the Universe. So it is all these very trauma informed, deep tantric personal practices. It's like the place to safely start. Um, and then I have an upcoming course called Liberating Eros, which starts in early December, which is for female identified women identified folks, to go through a process, a very conscious descent process around their sexuality and unpacking the stories there and really getting to learn how to stay and open to pleasure and define your experience as you want it. Um, and the best
Beautiful.
thing to do is follow me on Facebook as Caity
That's,
Reilly. Just
that's what
go
I would.
there. Yeah, that's what I'd recommend because it's like the place that gets updated the most. Like Instagram, I'm on there half the time. My website's never updated, but Facebook's a great way to connect. So,
I feel like I see you a lot on Facebook and all
yeah.
your options. So yeah, I think you'll
Yep. Awesome.
thank you so much. And yeah, and
Yeah.
I also offer one-on-one and mentorships and groups and classes. I will be doing some groups and classes soon. But
Mhm.
yeah, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah.
This was
Thank
really fun.
you.
And
So cool.
yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in.
Mhm.
Okay, bye.
Bye.